welcome.
Thanks, Bree. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be on the podcast with you. I just wanted to first kind of let our listeners know like a little bit about you, but also how I met you,
Okay,
right?
perfect.
I became aware of Robin through a former mentor whom I used to work for. They're siblings. And when I was dabbling in, it wasn't really dabbling. I was really invested at the moment for going towards training and development. And I actually did one of my like career interviews with Robin talking about training and development because that's her jam. That's her brother's jam. It's like, is it a genetic thing?
Perhaps, I don't know. I mean, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are both executive coaches, so I think it's a family thing. I don't
It's
know.
a family thing. It's because you guys are so committed to like people and humans and making sure stuff works well. So it's awesome. So, okay. So that's how I know Robin. She's a doctor, Dr. Berkeley. Do you like formality?
No, I tell my students, you can call me anything but late for dinner. It's all good.
Nice. And so, coming from higher education, there's this, there's formal respect about, Dr. Berkeley until, so, and I still appreciate it because, getting your PhD is a lot of work and you earned it. And so, I say it out of respect.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. The only thing that I don't like is when someone calls me Mrs. Berkeley. I'm like, Mrs. Berkeley doesn't exist. It's Dr. Berkeley, Professor Berkeley, Robin, but do not call me Mrs. Berkeley.
Right. Speaking of professor, you just got some really great news, right?
I did. Exactly. I just found out I got promoted to full professor starting in July and just waiting for the last rubber stamp to happen. But I'm excited about it. It's the top level thing the top level promotion that you can get as an academic and still be a professor and not a administrator. So
it's awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, okay, so let's get down to like the qualifiers, like what's your background and your experience and how did you get here?
Great question. When I was in college, I actually was a biology major. So for anybody out there thinking, oh my God, I'm not sure what I want to be when I grow up, don't worry. Because honestly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was about 30. And I worked in New York City for a large number of years after I graduated with a biology degree that I had no desire to do biology with anymore. And I decided, well, now what? So I started working in different jobs, different places, and realized what I needed in order to be successful in business is to have my MBA. So I got my MBA, and when I was in the midst of getting that MBA, I was realizing that there are a lot of managers that need help. There are a lot of managers that don't know how to manage, don't know how to supervise, don't know how to coach and lead. And that's what drove me for my MBA and ultimately drove me to go on to get my PhD. Because it's one thing to go out there and do the work and try to be the leader, but I figured I could have a bigger impact if I actually tried to train future leaders in the right way to approach things. And so that's kind of how I got there. And then when I hit 30, I finally decided I really wanted my PhD. So I went back to University of Wisconsin-Madison, got my PhD in business from there. And that was sort of what got me down that path. What brought me to T&D was largely because I love teaching. And it encouraged me to learn more about how I can be effective, not only at the university level in teaching people, but how can I then help executive clients, right? When people come to do exec ed with you, you're training them in particular skills. And so it helped me to switch my mindset to a training and development focus, which is a little different than higher ed. It really is, but it uses the same skill sets.
Yeah, I always imagine is the kind of like the knowledge builder, right? Like the traditional framework of higher education. It's there to round out your perceptions and assumptions about how things work. And then there's certain programs that do a really good job of taking it up the next level and doing the application component where you can get out and actually start implementing what you've applied, not just what you've learned, but what you've applied. And, when I'm talking to people about considering going back to school, one of the criteria I encourage them to have is making sure there's an application component in their program in some way. And if there is not an application component, then they need to make some decisions about how are they going to get that application component while they're in program so that they can have the highest possible placement once they graduate, right?
Right, exactly. And good programs on that are that emphasize experiential learning, that emphasize internships and opportunities for you to learn on the job, you know, and get paid for it, but also get that opportunity to be mentored and work through to learn things. So,
right.
yeah, there's higher ed needs to focus much more on the experiential. That's the goal.
For sure. And project-based learning, taking what they've learned and trying to integrate it into what they're doing at work so that they can like practice that while they're doing it and being supported from an educational perspective.
Right. Exactly.
To round out their perspectives on that. So what's really exciting is we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And specifically, I wanted to hit on this concept of upskilling versus reskilling.
Okay.
Right. The way the format's going to work, just to remind everybody what it's going to look like, we are always going to start with some education, right? Like we need to make sure that we build the foundations first, and then we're going to pivot from that information that we know into application. Not that you're going to be applying it with us on the podcast, but it's going to give you some how-tos to start trying to implement right where you're at work. Because let's be honest, working professionals have made very clear that growth and development is in their top 3 priorities when they're picking and choosing careers. So without further ado, let's talk about let's give a prelude about the areas that we're going to cover. Okay. Well, actually, I don't know if I want to do a prelude. Maybe we should just hit the points and just know that each point is going to pivot into application. Sound good? Perfect.
Absolutely. Sorry.
That's okay. It's all good. Okay. So the first one actually, let me back up. I'm so excited. You wrote a book, right? You co-authored a book, right? And this is where this conversation is really coming from. It's called Strategic Training and Development, right? And its sole purpose is to give some of us who love training and development something to geek out on. All in one
exactly.
spot.
I geeked out writing it, so I appreciate that tremendously.
So I'm totally geeked out about it. I love it because I use training and development, my knowledge and experience with training and development, to coach individuals on how to self-advocate in environments. And so I believe the more you know, the better you are at being able to, make educated decisions about yourself. So it's very research, pragmatic kind of way about going things, and really just I try to mitigate assumptions at all cost, right? So if I'm wandering around in a world of, well, I think it's this way, or I think it's that way, or I feel like it's something like this, then I tend to dig into literature or frameworks or theories to be able to help me substantiate that so that I can actually come up or create a solution to it that's like makes sense and connected to what we already know, right?
And that was the goal of our textbook, right? It's like, there are a number of textbooks out there. Excuse me. And the biggest one in the field is, and I won't name the name, but it's very theory driven, and it's very, this theory says, this author says, this theory says, and it's great, but it misses a lot of how do we then take it from theory to actually using it. And my co-author, David Kaplan, he's the chair of the management department at St. Louis University. He and I developed this because we felt like there was this big gap in the literature in a textbook availability, that we always ended up supplementing that other book. It's like, okay, well, now that you know the theory, this is how you actually have to use it. So we wanted to have the theory there, kind of in the background, supporting the stuff, but then, we talk about things like, how do you make a presentation? How do you deal with diversity related issues? What are some applied tools that you can use to do good training and development and to hit the ground running? Because our goal is we want our graduates, when they're done reading this book, to be able to get out there and start doing T&D right away. I mean, that's the essence of it. So
it's awesome. And so what we're going to do today is we are going to teach you a little bit about some components of T&D and how that can actually apply to you as an individual. Even though you may not be interested in doing training and development, I don't know, after this conversation, you might be really excited to consider training and development.
Yeah.
But what it'll do is it'll help you better understand the working environment from a training and development lens, so that you can actually do a better job of self-advocating and creating learning plans for yourself that are actually going to get you results in the long term,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're ready to dive in. Context always matters, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first one we were talking about was chapter 1, which was corporate environments. That was the first thing that caught my eye because I'm sitting here thinking, if I just understand the environment that I'm in and how they're engaging with me and what their purpose is, then I could do a better job of targeting my ask for development opportunities.
Exactly. Exactly right. Did you want me to elaborate on that?
Yes, please.
Okie dokie. So, like in anything, every organization has a mission, a vision, a goal that they're trying to achieve. And they want to use their human resources, the people in the organization, to support that goal. So the idea then is to make sure that what you do and what you contribute is in alignment with what the strategic vision is for the company. And where do you fit into that strategic landscape? And I know this sounds like a lot of buzzwords, but the bottom line is a company, you can look like a Walmart, right? Walmart competes on price. So everything that Walmart does is about keeping expenses down, keeping their profit margin as profitable as possible, and selling in volume. And so if you want to make a contribution at Walmart, your contribution has to be, I need to learn how to be more efficient at what I do so I can save us money, right? That's the kind of language you want to use. Now, if you work for somebody like Apple, where Apple is about innovation and new and exciting things, then your ask at Apple, or a company like Apple that's all about innovation and bells and whistles, is to simply say, I need new skills because I have these great ideas and I want to learn how to do this so I can contribute and make us more innovative and sexy and exciting. And so learning the language of the business is incredibly important for you to be able then to make the contribution to the organization. Your contribution should be in alignment in the direction that the company wants to go.
That's awesome. And what I think what you're pulling out right there is you're talking about some of the core values of the organization and how it drives the bus. And so many times we find ourselves in situations where we're out of alignment, like ourselves with the system.
Right.
And so, you know, those flags when you're trying to make asks, right? Like you're at Walmart and you're like, I just want to create and do this stuff and innovate and do all these things. And it's like, Walmart's like, you need to get to work on time and don't clock in, 10 minutes early. You need to be like as efficient as possible, clocking in within 5 minutes of whatever. Right. And you're like, that's just so frustrating because I want to be able to have this flexibility and creativity. And, that's a really huge thing to consider because that means that you're out of alignment with the values. And so when you're making your asks, if you find yourself making these asks and they keep getting shut down, that should be the first thing you should be taking a look at is are my values out of alignment with what the system is willing to offer me? Right.
Right.
And in order to make the ask successful, you have to figure out what works for them. And there's signals and signs all over that tell you exactly what it is that they're looking for.
Right.
And so, Robin just mentioned it. It was, the mission, the values, right? So actually I just had like a brain, boop, right? Like a thing just happened. What do you do when the communicated value and culture isn't necessarily in alignment with the implemented value and culture, right? Like what we say and what we do don't necessarily seem like they're in the same framework.
Oh, well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, fundamentally, you've got 3 options. You try to change it from within, and point it out and say, hey, we say this, but we do this. But no one wants to hear, particularly leaders don't always want to hear that they're inconsistent. And particularly if you're, an entry-level employee, who are you to tell me what I'm doing or not doing? And oftentimes there are things going on behind the scenes we may not be aware of, and it feels inconsistent, but it might actually be. But there's nothing wrong with asking the question. This feels inconsistent to me. Can you explain it to me? So it's the approach that you take sometimes that manages it. So you could try to change it. You could try to understand it from within. You can simply accept it for what it is, right? Or you can exit. So we call it exit, voice, and loyalty. And it's a theory that applies to all sorts of contexts. But bottom line is you leave, you're loyal and you just do it because you can, or you voice and say, this is problematic for me. How can we change this?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Being a career change agent myself, I'm typically the one that's like, this is a little out of alignment. I feel like something's not right here.
This
What do we
doesn't
think
feel
about
right.
that? Are
Why
we
are we
ready to have
doing
a
this?
conversation? Yeah. Are
Yeah,
we doing this? Are you there
got
yet?
in some trouble for doing that too.
Right. And then a lot of people aren't ready for change. And so, that's when I'm working with somebody and helping them realize, like, should I stay or should I go? Um,
Yeah, I love that song because I sing.
right.
Should I stay? Should I go? I don't know. I mean,
Right.
that comes down to issues of motivation, which I know we're probably going to get to in a little bit. In terms of thinking about different levels of motivation, I mean, the bottom line is you can be committed to the company and love everything they do. You can be committed to a job because you need a paycheck, or you can decide that, maybe this is just not good enough anymore and I'm not motivated and I'm going to move on. So.
And how wonderful is it to be at a place of so much awareness that you actually can be aware of your choice and act in your choice instead of be in a place of feeling like stuff's just happening to you. Right.
Correct. Yeah. And sometimes it's just a mindset change, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not always about things are being done to me. If you can change the way that you think about it and just say, I am recognizing this, I'm going to be the change agent for myself. And the more that you change your mindset and change the way that you approach things, you can take control over things in a way that you always felt like, you were the victim, and you're not the victim. You can manage it yourself.
Absolutely. Change doesn't happen if we live in a place of victimization. Like, we just
Right.
can't.
No,
Right.
no, you get
Yeah. And so, like, that's one of the first criteria of trying to evaluate whether or not I can actually make a change is like, am I playing the victim? Right. Like, is this happening to me? Because I can almost assure you it's not happening to you, as much as it is that you can have the control to choose whether or not you should stay, go, or engage,
Mm-hmm.
in dealing with that challenge. And so that brings us on to the next thing, right? Which was, we were talking about learning tools,
Mm-hmm.
and what that might look like in when we're making our ask, right?
Sure. I mean, it really depends on whether or not you are trying to learn something brand new, or whether you're trying to take something that you've learned and developing it to go further, right? So there's all sorts of different tools that we can use to help educate ourselves and take us from lower level learning, which is pretty much the memorization stuff, because we can all memorize things, right? But we want more than memorization. Organizations want more than just saying, I can memorize this and I remembered the 5 steps to do blah. Now you need to demonstrate it. So when you're making your ask to your organization, one of the things to think about is, do I need to go to a training class because I haven't learned this yet? So I need to memorize this. Or I now need an opportunity to use the things that I learned in that training class, and I can move on and do different things. So now maybe what I want is experiential learning, or I want a simulation to practice these things. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can learn and ask our organization for that support. The biggest thing with training and development, any kind of training and development, whether it's from the employee's perspective, the trainee, or the trainer, is that we want to take people from a place of, in the classroom, I've learned the knowledge, like I passed the test. We need them to transfer it to the daily activities. So the boss of the trainee needs to be able to facilitate that learning so that you can take what you learned and use it on the job. So the lecture is great for learning the material, but now I need simulation. Now I need to work on a project. Now I need opportunities to practice it on a regular basis. And this is where your supervisor has to be your partner on this, to say, you learned this, now I want to help you to practice it.
Right. And so in those moments when you're dealing with a manager, so we have different organizations have varying levels of T&D programs that are developed, right? Like, depending on the size, sometimes it's like they have some sort of, system where they do a lot of information dumping, but they don't have the infrastructure to help you figure out, maybe the manager doesn't even know how to create a project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where coaching comes into play, and we're going to get towards that towards the end, right?
Right.
But as a coach, as a career coach, part of my work is helping you maybe it's creating those projects, because there's a gap that's happening, where a competency gap for your manager in being able to design or develop those projects, right? Or maybe resources aren't available for you to do those things, right? But you love your job, you want to stay in your job, right? And so you've done a lot of information collecting, some knowledge development, and now you're like, I want to be this X, and I need to figure out how to do it. I'm in the how phases, like in application. And so, working with somebody to be able to first work with your supervisor, that's the ideal scenario, right?
Absolutely.
I always coach, like, go to the people who are that keep you there and encourage you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's not the case, and you have to negotiate that. And then that's where connecting with somebody who understands what this looks like, to be able to help you self-advocate by maybe shortening the time frame it takes for them to realize what that looks like, right? So somebody's taking training and they want to learn how to do, I'll use technology as an example, like a project management tool, like Smartsheets, right? Like, I've learned how to do Smartsheets, and I want to use Smartsheets in my project management for my program implementation for workshops. I'm speaking from my own experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my supervisor that's really not their jam or their forte, right? Because I'm on a team of specialists, and I should be the specialist in that area. So then it's like, I need to find a project that is useful to the group to be able to practice and implement that, and then connect with somebody who is highly skilled in using that tool,
Right.
to be able to mentor and coach, right? Because I can't coach outside of my competency.
Right. Correct. You can't.
Yeah. And so, and you have to be aware in those moments when you're making an ask for somebody to coach you outside of their competency,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's our part, and that's our part in the process. That's our requirement in regards to chasing work happy. Like, we have to know what it is that we need, and make sure that we're making the ask to the right person who has the capacity to give it to us, right? And if we don't, then we have to do the work to figure out where that's at, if that is something that is important for us to grow and move forward and develop our career the way we want to, right?
And a good boss, a supervisor, should know their own strengths and weaknesses. I mean, that is a foundation of any MBA program, which is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Because if you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are, you won't know how to adapt and to manage those around you. So your boss should know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then from there, if they're like, that's out of my bailiwick, and I'm going to suggest you go talk to Sarah over here, because Sarah knows that software. She can help you with that. I will advocate. I will make the ask, because that's my job, right? My job is to help you to get the skills you need. But then it's on you to work with Sarah to make sure that you get what you need on that. So a really good boss is going to know what their limits are and help you to find the right resource to be able to do that, or empower you to say, go and do, and when you find, come back and talk to me. And that kind of gets into that issue of the delegation that we were just talking about before.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
And, keep in mind that when you make that ask, sometimes that comes off as resistance. Maybe you have to think about when you're asking them the question, like, are you like busting in and like in the middle of whatever and being like, hey, I really wanted to try this thing. I'm not speaking from experience at all.
No, not at all. I understand.
Not at all. Are you,
Timing is everything.
Yeah, right. Timing is really important. Are you asking during a high volume period where everybody is focused on another thing? Imagine being on a highway going on the Autobahn. Let's make it like real serious. Like, imagine being on the Autobahn, and then all of a sudden you like just rip on the e-brake and you're like, I want to do this thing. And they're like, but we're all going 100 miles an hour this direction, right? What's going to happen to the car, right?
It's going to crash and burn.
Yes. So you're asking that time, like the timing matters in the ask.
Right.
Your intent matters in the ask,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to ask with purpose. Like, you have to connect with what it is that they're offering. If you're trying to ask for something completely outside of scope, it may not be that it's impossible to access, but just know that you're going to have an uphill battle trying to educate them on why it's important for you to learn that thing. And
Right.
so, in order to maximize your time while you're at work in your development pathway, you have to factor these things in so that you can make sure that that's the strategic part, right? Strategically get your needs met with the thing that makes sense, right? Sometimes your ask, like sometimes in all of that, you discover your ask is completely like, it's like another version, right? Like it's an added thing to your career or another way you want to go. You know, if you're not ready to deal with that yet, put it in a parking lot, right? And just
Absolutely.
know, right? And know that you've been inspired, but you're maybe not quite motivated yet, right? Because you're not willing to take massive action towards that thing, which may include leaving your job to go do something else.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a whole separate animal, right? I mean, the goal, of course, is we always want to develop within the context of the organization we're in. And we have to recognize, based on the first things that we talked about, which is what's the environment of the organization, what are their missions and values, what is it that they're trying to accomplish, and the way that they're trying to accomplish it. Learn the language and the purpose of your business first. Know that fundamentally. And then see when you're making your ask, it has to be in alignment with what that purpose of the business is. So when you're making your case, say, this is how I can affect the bottom line. This is why this will make my job better. This is why it's important for me to do this. And they might say, that's a great idea, but we don't have the money or the time right now. That's good. So can I come back to you in 4 months or 6 months and we can talk about this? And then you negotiate like any SMART goal, specific, measurable, time bound. I'll come back in 6 months, we'll talk about this again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you get to a place where the answer is always no, and you're not getting what you need, then yes, then it's time for you to consider, maybe I need to find another organization that's in alignment with my values and where I want to go. And that's a natural, normal, okay thing. Change is scary. No one likes change. But sometimes change is exactly what we need to break open our careers and really give us the opportunity that we never thought we would have. And I mean, I experienced this myself. I worked at a school before I came to SIUE that just wasn't in alignment with the way I saw the world. And no matter what I did, and I did the best job that I could, what I wanted and what they could give me were not in alignment. And it was time to say goodbye. It was time to say thank you for everything you did for me. And now I'm going to move on to the next level that works for me. And a good boss and a good organization will recognize that and make it work for you.
Absolutely. Like all the way.
Woo, high five.
Right? Digital high five.
Digital
right?
high five, baby.
That is exactly it. I think that's like my life's mission for any and all of this, is to help people get to the place of realizing that when things aren't working at work, it's not a rejection of you as a human. It's the fact that like literally it was a bad date from the very beginning.
Right.
Like you were never a fit to begin with. And what you found out, all the rose-colored glasses have come off, you've had the experience, you know what it's been like, and you have now discovered that like who you thought you loved, you don't love anymore, or you never did.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you loved an aspect of it, but it really wasn't going to fulfill you in the end.
It wasn't the whole thing. It didn't fit every aspect of you. And so, the ability to be able to gracefully bow out, build bridges instead of burn them starts,
absolutely.
right?
Never burn a bridge if you can.
Never burn a bridge. I call that career collateral. Like, so sometimes I'll work with people where we need to repair their career collateral. So we'll have to start from the very bottom and they'll have to do things that they really don't want to do. And we practice, like build a bridge, don't burn it, build a bridge, don't burn it. You're doing this for a purpose because you're trying to put some distance between the fire and like your next big best thing, because you're trying to get to the thing that you're trying to fit into. Right.
Absolutely.
And so
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, dear.
I was going to say, when I worked in industry before I got my MBA and eventually got my PhD, I worked in New York City for years for a whole bunch of different businesses. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is oftentimes smaller businesses don't always have the money to invest in training needs and skill needs. And if you can afford to do it yourself, you should do it. For example, I worked for a company that needed me to have a skill base in accounting that I had never had before. I think I maybe had an accounting class in high school. Maybe, I don't remember. And honestly, it's that long ago. Who knows, right? But I
Those
need
darn debits and credits too.
Yeah, right. Debits and credits. And for a biology major, what's a debit? No idea. So I asked them for the support on that. And they said, well, it's our policy. We don't pay for training and development. Okay, you're going to lose me eventually, but that's the way it's going to work. So I basically went out and I took all the classes that I needed. So I understood the fundamentals of what a debit and a credit was. So, and that got my taste buds flowing. And it made me realize that an MBA is actually what I needed. But at least I took the initiative to learn when the company, for whatever their motivations and reasons were, they decided that investing in training was just really not an option for me. And so don't ever feel despair if you make an ask and they say no. Find it yourself. That's what Bree is there for you to do. That's what a lot of companies are out there to help you. It's like, if I need help, I'm going to go find the help and I'm going to go take care of it myself. And then I'm going to launch my own career. So this is about changing the narrative and feeling like something happened to me. They wouldn't train me. And you switch it in your head to say, I am training myself. I'm investing in myself.
I look at those opportunities as a way to demonstrate, that's the universe, that's the system telling us where our gaps are.
Yep.
Right. And at some point we're going to have to put some skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not going to there's not a single thing throughout the entire process where it's going to just be handed to us. And so in those moments, we can have a temper tantrum about what they won't do for us, or we can be thankful for realizing that we had the capacity, moving on to our component, which is the conscious competence model, the capacity to realize that we have a knowledge gap and it needs to be solved. And not only does it need to be solved, but it's important for us if we want to continue to move forward. And sometimes we can get support from the company in doing that. Other times we have to come up with solutions. And that's career, guys. I'm sorry, folks, people, like, that's the way it works. And so if you feel like you're kind of sitting in a stuck rut because nobody's going to figure this out for you, I'm telling you, like, that's what it is. Like, that's the hard part about career. I think that's the part that they don't tell us. Right.
Right. We all sit back and expect the boss to do it for us. And like, I've had enough years of experience to know maybe you'll get a good boss. Maybe you won't. But if you don't advocate for yourself, you're going to go nowhere and you're going to feel like a victim. And that's the last place you want to be in.
It's such a horrible place to be. It hurts so much. It hurts so much to be in that place. Mm-hmm. And I hope for everybody in the world, if they've ever had, all of us, I think, have had a moment of feeling like we're the victim, but like, just don't live in it. It's not, there are solutions and there are ways to get through it. So conscious competence model. We were talking about this kind of prepping for the interview. What I'm super stoked about is that I'm not nuts, because I talk about this all the time in training and support. Maybe it's the like-minded thing. Maybe it's just like, it's a universal truth, but let's talk about conscious competence model.
Sure, absolutely. And the conscious competence model, as I was explaining to Bree, was we don't really know who came up with the idea. And if somebody does know, please let Bree know or let me know, because I've been looking for years to find the source of this nugget of wisdom, which really makes such intuitive sense. And the way the conscious competence model works, it's kind of like a 2x2 model, right? We're either conscious or unconscious about things, and then we're competent and incompetent. And we start typically in what we call unconscious incompetence, where we aren't even aware that we're just not doing something right, or what we've been doing, which used to work, no longer works. And this is really the foundation of any kind of change management, whether it's at the macro organization level or at the micro individual level. We need to make sure that we need to bring people out of the unconscious to the conscious. So we have to make them aware that this is not working and why it's not working. And so that's the job of working with coaches and getting feedback, performance feedback from your managers. As hard as it might be to hear this, sometimes they're going to say, you're just not doing this right. And you should be actively soliciting that information from people. You should be actively saying, how am I doing? Right? Am I doing okay? And you might hear something you don't like, but think of that as an opportunity, not as, oh my God, I'm a horrible person, because you're not, because we all make mistakes. We all trip and fall. So my job as your coach or as your boss is to get you to conscious incompetence to start with. So I make you now aware and more open to the idea that a change needs to be made and we need to make a change. So and now we move into that gap between what I'm doing now and where I need to be in a conscious way. So I'm open to the training, I'm open to the interventions that are going to happen. Whether I advocate for myself or my boss advocates for me, my goal is to get from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. But conscious competence is not enough, because conscious competence is basically saying, I'm learning, I've memorized the things, right? I know the basics, but that doesn't mean you're going to do it well and consistently all the time. Like in anything, whether it's a sport or a musical instrument, you name it, you have to practice, right? All the time. Practice, practice, practice. And practice is the only way, application is the only way you're going to move from conscious competence, where I'm aware that I need to know this, to unconscious competence, which basically means I don't even have to think about it anymore. I've got this down so well that I know how to do this and I know how to apply it in all sorts of contexts. And it's a cycle, right? We go to unconscious competence because now we're doing this right because it's a new context and a new skill and a new thing and a new environment. And then ultimately, like anything in life, right? We're going to die, we're going to pay taxes, and things are going to change. Life changes, and suddenly we find ourselves in unconscious incompetence again. And it's a cycle. And when you're in the mindset that you know you always have to learn and you always have to increase your skill set and adapt to your environment, that conscious competence model is going to guide you every step of the way. Be open to change, learn that change, internalize that change, and then recognize when it's not working anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly, I think that's like the catalyst for seeking coaching, is usually when you're like, this hurts really bad and it used to work and it doesn't work anymore and I just don't know why, right? And you need some of that introspection and reflection and context to be able to figure out like how to overcome that and adapt. Maybe it's relearn. Sometimes we forget the foundations, and so you got to relearn it or reinvest in it because of things going on. Other times it's like you've kind of turned the I don't even know what you call those. I think of like a round thing with a lot of sides to it, right? Like it just turns and you keep turning and turning and turning until like it's all rounded out, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing I was thinking about while you were talking about that, what I use a lot in trying to help people gauge whether or not they think they can do something versus whether or not they can,
right.
As well as right, as well as their motivation, is the situational leadership model.
Right.
So the concept of my confidence, because it's a proven fact, our confidence can really do a good job of masking our competence. It can also do the opposite. It can also do the opposite. And we have to take environmental feedback to calibrate that, right? Absolutely. So there's like the situational leadership model. When I'm talking about it, I use it as to say, okay, where I'm perceiving you in this area, I think you're really confident in doing that thing, and I think that's awesome, but I've asked you how to operationalize it and give me examples on how you've executed it, and we're kind of like sketchy on that part. So I believe you can do it, but there's some application experiences that need to take place before you're like considered an expert. Right.
Action verbs, right? Like in anything, like when we build a resume, we have the skill, we have the thing we did, we have the action, we have the outcomes. I did this in this way with this kind of outcome. So it needs to be a very active way of approaching things. Just to say that you learned it and you sat in a classroom and listened to a lecture does not make you an expert. It means I learned the material, but I have never used it yet. So I need to learn it. And you've got to be honest about that.
Yeah, and it's okay. You want to know, when you're honest about that, you open up the opportunity for somebody to actually come in and mentor you on how to actually do the thing.
Yeah, that's the goal.
So that is the goal, right? Because like you need somebody who knows, who has been where you've been, to know where to go so that you can go on to the next thing, right?
Yep.
So another tool we were talking about, I don't know if it was a tool, but talk to me a little bit about Delegation Continuum. So,
Okay.
and how can I use that to be able to encourage an upskill request or a reskill request, which we haven't given a definition for, by the way, but we'll give that towards the end.
Sure. I mean, so you're talking about it from the perspective of the employee or from the supervisor?
So tell us a little bit about Delegation Continuum from a supervisor's perspective, and then let's flip it on its head and talk about it from like, how can I observe that behavior happening so that I can figure out how to get my needs met?
Absolutely. So the delegation, everybody talks about managers need to delegate more or people need to delegate more. but we don't, you can't assume that it's what we call a 1-0. It's on or it's off, right? You don't either delegate or not delegate. There's a whole range of things between no delegation and maximum delegation that we have to consider. And you cannot expect employees, as a manager or supervisor, you can't expect your employees to be unconsciously competent on a whole host of things. Go back to that conscious competence model, right? If you've got somebody who is now learning something brand new, you can't say, okay, here, go do this, with no support, no resources, and no feedback. So when we delegate to someone, we have to recognize where the person is on that continuum of readiness. Are they knowledgeable? Are they willing to take the responsibility? Do they know how to do it? And can we trust them to get it done? And so there are actually 12 steps to delegation, if you will, or 12 levels of delegation. And some of the levels are just nuanced differences, but they mean something, right? We can't, the lowest level would be, sit with me, I'll teach you how to do this, and then I'm going to watch you do it. And that's like a side-by-side on-the-job training. And then at the highest level is, this is your responsibility now. Ultimately, it rests on my shoulders, but I've trained you, I trust you, I've watched your judgment, I trust what you're doing, and then I'm willing to let this go and let this be 100% your responsibility. But notice what I said at the beginning. I trained you, I trust you, I've watched you make decisions, so I know that you're going to do the right thing no matter what. So we have to, as managers, get people to that level 12 if we can. We may not be able to. Not everybody is capable of it. But our job is to remember that we can't just dump it on someone's plate and say, go to town, without money, resources, or support.
Absolutely. So that the really simplified explanation you gave, which is train you, trust you. What were those that you just said? Train you, trust you, watched you do it. Now you can do it on your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that as like, if I'm trying to solve a access problem to the thing I need to be developed, like the first thing I have to ask myself is, have I been trained? Right? Is the thing that they're asking me to do, am I trained in doing it?
Do I have the skill set to do it? Exactly.
Do I have the skill set to do it? Not just I read about it, but can I do it? Right? Okay. So anecdotal story. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always willing to try things out. And early on in my career, I would always volunteer for things that was completely outside of my competence, not because I thought I could do them, but because I wanted to learn, and and unfortunately I didn't have the support systems in place to learn helpfully. I usually learned through failure and learned hard, because oftentimes people were asking somebody to do it because they didn't have the competence to do it. So I was like the innovator, the lead taker. I was like, I'm going to figure it out. And then it was, the experience was valuable for me. That's how I learn. I learn well and learn hard, right? I call it learn hard because you're doing it without any support. You don't, it's like tying a blindfold around your face and being like, okay, figure out this thing on your own. And you're like touching things and figuring it out and kind of putting stuff. And then you open it up and you should have put together a chair and it's some weird, freaking
It's like an
70s
IKEA
sculpture
thing.
or
It just
something.
doesn't fit together.
Yeah.
All the parts aren't there.
Right. Um, and in those moments, in hindsight, how helpful would it have been for me to realize when I needed to like that when I volunteered to do something new or to learn something new, that I could say, oh, okay, well, I need training. Do you know how to do it?
Mhm.
Like, or am I going to be the one figuring out how to do it? Like, where am I at in that continuum? And can they support me in that? Because some of those projects can make or break your career, your credibility. It could actually deteriorate your trust with other people, right? Like they don't, and honestly, I like to be a little vulnerable. I have destroyed some trust relationships and my ability to do certain things in past careers because I wanted to learn and I was eager to participate and I was okay with failing, but I failed publicly and it attacked the trust in my ability to be able to do everything, even though it was just that thing that I screwed up on, right? Because we can't always fail publicly and be supported as a learning experience in that way.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of vulnerability in saying I messed up. I mean, and I'll be vulnerable too. I have a project very recently. I mean, here I am, 57 years old, and I still struggle with this stuff. So I was working on a project for somebody, and I was started to struggle with it. And I never addressed it with the person. And it wasn't until we were closing in on the deadline that all of a sudden I just went, I'm struggling with this. And again, my overconfidence, oh, I can do this, no problem. And it wasn't really until I was faced with the deadline and I realized this was way more complex than I gave it credit for, and I blew it. And it was such a vulnerable thing for me because I love this person, like my left kidney. I mean, I feel like I let them down and I didn't do what I needed to do well. And I recouped and it was fine and we got it worked out, but it was a moment of vulnerability for me because I realized this was a public screw up. This wasn't just like, oh, I tripped and fell in my own home and no one knew about it. This was like, yeah, I dropped the ball. We all do. Our learning opportunities don't come from successes. Learning comes from failure because success comes for a whole host of reasons. But it's in failure where we look at what we did. We look at how we did it, why we did it, when we did it. We learn how, from that experience, how to make changes for the future. And that's what builds up our skill set, our competence, our ability to make those associations, and our ability to work at higher levels of learning to apply things in different ways. It failed here, but it's working well here,
Yeah. And so what you were talking about this delegation continuum, the reason why I'm so, sparkly attracted to it is the idea of it being able to help me sort through, and this conscious competence component, right? Sort through when it makes sense for me to go all out and learn hard, right? Versus maybe being like, I would love to do that thing because I'm super interested in doing that thing, but to be quite honest, I need to pair up with Robin because she's better at that, I think, than me.
Right.
And so I really
want to I need to learn from others.
Yeah. I need to be an assistant. I need to be an apprentice, right? Instead of being the lead on the thing, right? And if you're leading for the first time or doing for the first time, to insulate yourself just a little bit. I'm not saying you can't learn that you don't not learn through failure because failure is a really great way to remember what not to do next time, right? But that you help yourself a little bit by recognizing that you need a little extra support.
Yes.
Right?
There's nothing wrong with asking for support. It's something that I try to teach my own children, right? It's like you are your best advocate. You have to ask for support. You cannot sit in a place and say, well, I don't understand this, so I'm just going to be quiet about it and not ask. Because if you don't ask, which is what happened to me, I was stuck and I didn't ask for support and I didn't communicate my challenges, and that came back to bite me. So it doesn't matter. Everybody needs support. Everybody needs to be willing and able to say, I am over my head and I need help.
Yep. And here's the differentiator. Literally, if you have never done the thing that you're volunteering to do, if you have never done it, I don't care how many notebooks you've read about it or wrote about it or how many TED Talks you've watched. Like, you are not competent in doing that thing yet. What you're asking is you want to practice that thing, and you should practice that thing with a support system. You shouldn't be I mean, you can do it on your own, but again, learn hard, fail hard. It's a public display of a shit show. You know, like,
That's a really great way of putting it.
yeah. And that's great. And you may survive those. Maybe your environment is open to that. I was talking to some startups, like, that's how they do work, right? But they're really forgiving in failure, right? Because they fail forward. They have a culture of fail forward.
Right.
But so many
That's
of us
the key.
don't, right? But so many of us are environments where fail forward is really not acceptable, right?
Right.
And so if your culture doesn't cosign, and cosign, I use that a lot as kind of like it's fitting for this, but anyways, right? To cosign that process, then like your culture, you have to be in a culture of fail forward in order for you to just be all in and be like, I'll figure it out. Right. And then you kind of just take everybody through the figure it out process.
Right.
Most of the time we're not in those environments. And so that's the differentiator. That's how you know. If you're going to volunteer for something, you should be asking yourself, have I done this before? And when I mean done this, I mean applied it, had a result. You had something to describe. You can teach somebody else how to do it. Right. If this is a new thing and you're taking it on as a stretch project, support. Ask for support. Training, and humans who have already done it. Right. So, I think that leads us to the coaching component, right?
Yeah. My favorite part.
Yeah.
So from a manager's perspective, oftentimes when people come to us and ask us for developmental support, we go to our T&D budget and go, no money, no programs, right? Not every development opportunity has to be sending you out to a seminar on how to be a better leader. Sometimes it's about saying, here's a job, here's a project, here's things that are going on, and I'm going to help you take on this project, and I will coach you through the project. It's not extra money, it's a little extra time, but development isn't just sending someone to a seminar. It's more complex than that. It is, to go back to the term, it's more like a continuum, right? I can get you into a project. Like, let's say that your company decides it wants to do a blood drive, right, for the Red Cross. So why not volunteer to take a lead on that? Because that shows leadership skills, organizational skills, project development skills, marketing skills, persuasion skills to get people to do it. So there are opportunities for you to take the lead and to develop leadership skills in those moments by doing things like that. Going to your boss and saying, I would like to do this new project, and I think this would be in alignment with a skill set that I need for my own personal development, for the company, and for the company, right? Both, because not always are those two things in alignment. So when I say I want to develop for myself, but also I think this will benefit the company if I learn this skill, and you can make that case. So the boss will then try to find a project for you, either within the scope of your job or a special project that pops up that you can, like an ad hoc team, you can then volunteer to do that and to work on that ad hoc team. And then of course you can always ask for things like, I would like a lateral move to a new position in a different department because it's in an area that's interesting to me. And I did that myself once, where I asked if I could move from one area to another area in a company. I said, because that's a skill set that I would rather have. I want to learn the numbers. I want to learn the financial statements and how to decide whether or not somebody's a good risk for something. And I ended up not doing that. And in the end, that was a right decision for me, because the bottom line is it wasn't my area of expertise, and it really wasn't an area that I felt comfortable in. So they also helped me too to realize, even though that's an aspiration, you're probably not going to be really good at it either. And so sometimes when you make an ask, you're going to hear something like, I know you really, really, really want to be the pitcher for the New York Yankees or the Colorado Rockies, but in the end, you really don't have the skill set to do that. And I can help you with these things, but I think in the end, that's not a good match for you. So that's part of coaching. It's part of what we want to do. As an employee who needs the development opportunities, don't assume that it's just a training session. You can get development opportunities doing all sorts of small projects and large projects, volunteer opportunities, coaching, mentoring, informal or formal. Find a mentor, find somebody that you trust. So, I mean, you know, Bree, you said it originally that my brother was a really great mentor for you, and he's really good at doing that. I know he is. But it doesn't have to be a formal mentor program. You can go find somebody that you trust and believe in and say, can I meet with you once a month for lunch and pick your brain, and can you help me work through issues that I'm concerned about that I don't feel like I can talk to my boss about? And that's a great thing. Do that. Find somebody that you trust that you can bounce ideas off of, to get you there. And then ultimately, if you really want to, and you really feel like this is not working for you, you can hire an external coach like Bree and others who will outside of the realm of your job give you some objective advice on what your strengths and weaknesses are and how we can move you to a better career that enriches you, that gets you the skill set that you want. And ultimately you may decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this. I want to run my own business, or I want to go work for this kind of company. And the goal is to find what is your bliss. I love that term. Good coaches go, here's what I think you should do. Here's some things that, what are your dreams? Ask them the questions and helping you to achieve those dreams for yourself. And if it, you know, whether it's outside of that company you're in or in the company, but what is your dream and what's your bliss and how you're going to get there?
Yeah, and the whole point of this entire interview today is taking a look at how to build this right where you're at. Like, you don't have to wait until you're in the ideal company, working with the ideal people, doing the ideal thing, because by then you've already made it and you probably already figured out that that's not where you want to be either, and you need to move on to the next thing, right? You're ready to grow and develop. And so part of taking control of your career path and your career journey and developing work that fits, because it just doesn't find you. You have to develop it by exploring your opportunities and investigating and asking information and participating and engaging and accepting and rejecting all of the information so that you can sort through it. And so this career process that we have as professionals is, it's like a spiral, right? Like, some of us kind of like just try, and then we go to this other thing, then we go to this other thing, we go to this other thing, and we're chasing something, we're looking for something. I try to focus people on considering it like a spiral, right? Like, you take a look at your entire experience while you're in there and you're like, what am I chasing? What do I enjoy? Why is the, you know, I have this saying, and I've heard other people say it before, but it's like, does it bring me joy? Does it put money in my pocket? Right?
And
Those are my, like,
both, yay, you know, that's the
win,
goal.
right? And the third one is priorities. Is it does it help me serve my goal in the overall, the kind of person I want to be, the kind of place I want to be, how I want to present myself? Because bottom line, career is a projection of how we see ourselves in the world. Yes. And if it is out of alignment, if career is important to you, meaning it's like in your top three, yourself, career, and family, or yourself, career, and some other component, maybe it's your spirituality, right? If it's in your top three, I can assure you that any sort of dissonance, which is discomfort or vibration that you're getting from not fitting where you're at, has to do with the fact that you're not in alignment with your career as a priority and putting that in and investing in it so that it represents who you are, because it's not doing that for you.
Right. And that's really what coaching is about. Good coaches can help clients see when that vibration is out of alignment. It needs to all vibrate on the same frequency, because otherwise things crack, right? And you become unhappy with your job, or you leave your relationships, or you have crisis of faith, whatever it is. Those things have to vibrate together. It's like, I have a hard time working for companies that don't align with my values. I really do. I have a very clear sense of what I think should be, in my own world and the things that I will do for myself and for others. And if the company is advocating for me to do something out of my ethics or my morals, I used to work for Drexel Burnham Lambert. My job collapsed. And after that job, because of Michael Milken and junk bonds and all that sort of stuff, I made a decision I would never work for a company like that again, where I felt like I was not in alignment with what I thought was the right way to treat people and the right way to do things.
Exactly. And when it comes to fit, here's the thing that I want everybody to take away from this. Okay. And Robin says it very clear multiple times in the way that she's made decisions about career and how she navigates it, as well as how she coaches others to navigate it, whether they're helping you facilitate your journey or they're participating in it. And it boils down to the fact that you have to develop a self-awareness about yourself so clear that those experiences, like they scream at you, they jump out at you, you know exactly what they are. I tell you, you can smell career fit from a mile away, right? Mm-hmm. Because you know yourself so well that you can sort through all the you don't even have to kiss the frogs to get to the whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Because you just know what it looks like. And not only do you know what it looks like, but you can say what?
You're in the flow.
You're in the flow, exactly. And you know it so well that you don't even need to reject anything. You can just be like, yep, that doesn't work for me. And you don't even need to have a conversation about how it's not a fit for you and it doesn't work. And that's not the thing that you need to be doing, because you are so clear about what it is that you need to be doing that you can, say, hey, you, I see you. I like you. And I know you're going to like me because we're like this. You just, give me 5 minutes and we're going to all be on the same page and we're going to set fire together. Right. In a good way.
Absolutely. So, and I think when we think about for ourselves, right, when we need to change and when we need to move on, we may not always know right away, right, what it is. I mean, like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was 30, so sometimes you have to be incredibly present to where you're at, what you're doing. And when you are present and not stressing, opportunities open up themselves to you, a path that you never thought you'd want to do. Think about it. Take the chance, right? What have you got to lose in many respects, right? So someone says, I think you'd be really good at this. And you're like, oh, people used to say, you're going to be a great teacher. I'm like, I don't want to teach. Why would I want to teach? Teaching, oh, it's awful. I don't want to do that. And guess what I do for a living, right? I mean, my interest inventory when I was in high school said I'd either be a really good mortician or a really good teacher. I didn't really want to work with dead people, so I decided teacher would work in the end. But that wasn't my career aspiration at all. I mean, it wasn't where I wanted to be. So when the opportunity presented itself, I took the step in that direction on that branch that I never thought I would do. And now I have a career that I never, ever thought I would ever be in. But I listened to people and people said, this is what you're good at. And that's what you want to cultivate, is asking people, what am I good at? I'm here, but I'm not feeling fulfilled. This is not doing for me what I want. What do you think I'm good at? What do you think are my strengths and weaknesses? Where do you think I could thrive using those strengths that I have?
Absolutely. It's this and the final question you should be asking yourself, am I trying to pivot quickly because I'm trying to solve a problem now?
Right.
Or am I trying to, build or go to the thing, whatever that thing is, right? And the highest probability of you being able to pivot quickly starts with building from what you already have experience and skills in, right? And what I have found in career is that it kind of just keeps flipping, right? And there's a lot of overlap, skills transferability, all of that. And I'm so excited because I have, we've talked about mentors today. We've talked about coaching. We've talked about, I just mentioned skills transferability. These are like all the things that I'm going to continue to talk about. Right. And I have interviews lined up for these things so that we can talk about what that looks like, and how to, dream big, but be practical first so that we can build our foundation to connect to the next thing. Right. So I think we just had the best hour and 10-minute-ish
Yeah, something
conversation
like that.
I've
Yeah.
had all week,
Well,
right?
good. Yeah, this has
Um,
been a fun week. I've enjoyed this very much.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that there's lots of opportunities out there for people. I think the most important takeaway from this is you are the master of your career. And even when you feel like things are being done to you, reframe it. Think of it as an opportunity and think of it as a way to upskill or reskill, right? So let's go back to that point that you said. We're talking about upskilling and reskilling. Upskilling means you're developing yourself hierarchically with more advanced skills, right? Reskilling is, I've been doing this, it's not working for me. Let me shift over here to the left or shift over to the right and learn something different. That's reskilling. And oftentimes people are so resistant to reskilling. Like, we love the idea of upskilling. We love the idea of developing what we have deeper, better, broader, whatever. But we always, the idea of reskilling and trying something brand new is scary as all get out. But reskilling might be moving you in that direction to that bliss. It's moving you around that spiral that Bree was talking about to get you to a place where suddenly you're going, wow, I never thought I would do this, and I'm loving this. And now I want to try this different thing. So don't be afraid of the reskilling part of it, because the reskilling is the thing that gets you the brand new opportunities and opens new doors, and it helps you to rethink yourself, remake yourself, or rethink about yourself in a way that's unusual. And in this time right now with the pandemic and people losing jobs and getting furloughs or whatever, reskilling may be the way to rethink the way that you are doing your work and maybe open different opportunities for you.
for sure. And, for me, I very much started my career thinking that upskilling was the only solution. Like, I was going to be a chief academic officer at a university, and I interviewed him, and I was going to do all those things. And then I realized that when my life changed and I had little people, and the amount of effort that I had to put into those things to make it what I wanted it to be, what I expected it to be, interfered with some of my other values. And so I had to step back a little bit, and I started doing reskilling, right?
Yeah.
And there's aspects of my work. So, you look at my portfolio, I'm probably not quite the traditional coaching person because, I've never been a CFO except for of my own world and my own experience here at HD Career Consulting. But there's one thing I do well and one thing I know how to do, and I've continued to coach for long before I became a coach, which is the reskilling strategy. And part of the reason why I do that is for survival, right? Because things change. And I want to be able to have the opportunity to successfully pivot
Yep.
into a new profession when I
Perfect.
have the opportunity to do so, right? And so my road is longer up the vertical track for some people, right? Than for some people, right? But in the long run, when all of my other values have shifted after my kids are grown and all of that kind of stuff, maybe I will go back into a company if I'm not doing my jam right now and I'll be that much better because of all of the different things that I've reskilled on, right?
Yep. Be happy right here, right now. Find,
Be happy.
every moment is an opportunity for happiness. So if you change that mindset, you can be happy doing what you are now, and then recognize that there's something else I might want to do in a couple of years from now, and allow the organic nature of that path to move out. Because if the adage, we plan and God laughs, is so true. The more
Right.
we plan and try to keep control over things, the more chaos evolves. So give it some boundaries, right? Walk on a path with boundary conditions, but allow yourself some freedom within that path to make adaptations as you need to.
Yep. So upskilling versus reskilling, that's the moral of our story today,
Mm-hmm.
is about how to ask for upskilling versus reskilling.
Yep.
Whether it's a vertical movement or tangential movement within an organization, or working on projects to be able to reskill you in a way that creates access for you in a new field or subsector
Mm-hmm.
in the future, right?
Absolutely. That'll do it.
So, Bones, it was awesome. I love chatting with you. We're going to do it again, right?
Absolutely. Anytime. You just let me know what you need.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit stop.